What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto Yonko One Piece? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. A short career. Captain Naruto Uzumaki. He was a proud young officer and Vice Admiral Garp's best officer since many years. The young blonde man counted 15 years and he was a master of Rokushiki, a fighting style he was taught already by his parents. It was a fact in the Marines that the blonde didn't tell anyone about his family. For the Marines he was just an Uzumaki and they were right. By his mother's blood he was an Uzumaki, but the Marines mustn't know that he came from a family full of pirates. His mother was the sister of Yonko and leader of the red-haired pirates, the Red Hair Shanks and pirate herself. His mother was known as Crimson Death Namikaze Kushina, married to another Yonko. His father was Namikaze Minato, leader of the Flash Pirates. His father himself ate the Senku no Mi, a Logia-type devil that turned the man into a living Flash. His connection alone would have made Naruto a target to the Marines, so he covered all his traces to his family with using his mother's maiden name. It allowed him to become a legal sailor. Unlike the rest of his family, he wants to uproot the Navy legally and gaining ranks and taking names. With his own ship, the Silent Hunter, he started into the world full of adventures. The blonde, well-built young man didn't know his crew, but he had a feeling that he and his crew would manage and become great. He was optimistic that soon he could argue with the higher-ups about the global situation and that not all pirates were bad. So there he stood. His whole new crew, and he stood on the pier to their ship and listened to Garp's pricing that their new captain was a level-headed and well-trained marine with a bright future. Naruto's chest puffed in pride and he took his captain coat and his first assignment. They had to meet up with the fleet at the Sabaody archipelago. The fleet admiral would take over the command there. Naruto turned to his young crew and grinned. Set sails, he shouted, and the sailors sprinted to the ship and did their work. The Grand Line was waiting for them and their adventure started. The fresh crew was wet to their bones. A storm had shaken the men on the ship and their main sail was ripped, but one crew member already worked on that. Their shipwright worked hard on the mizzenmast because it was nearly destroyed. The only positive side effect was that they were a bit earlier than they had to be. But the fleet admiral just had barked out orders and now they sailed next to the big ships of the admirals, threatened by the bow wave every now and then. Naruto wasn't happy how his crew was treated, but he was just a lonely captain in a fleet full of commodore, rear and vice admirals led by the fleet admiral himself. He endured the bickering and degrading comments of the higher-ranking officers. He was a greenhorn that he knew, but he wouldn't let them spit on his crew's achievements because they sailed through a storm without complaining. The Silent Hunter wasn't made for storms on the Grand Line. Their ship wasn't made for the Grand Line at all. But the captain was optimistic. The crew had faith in him and followed his command bravely. Naruto would fight for them until they got a bigger ship that would carry on the endurance of the Silent Hunter. They just needed someone giving them a thumb up and then they would bring justice to the world. The blonde captain nearly jumped out of his musings when the Den Den Mushi rang and he ran up to it. Uzumaki, a rear admiral, shouted and he winced. Sir, he responded respectfully. We are facing a Yonko soon, Uzumaki. Fleet Admiral Sengoku sends your ship out for scouting. Use that chance to prove that you are worth your money. The rear admiral barked and the blonde understood. I understand, sir. We are going to set sails. He answered and shouted the commands. They sailed away from the island into the open sea and half a day later the big marine ships followed. Naruto sighed at the sight of his higher-ups in fire range. At the moment they were only cannon fodder and that was something that made the young captain nervous. The sun downed and no pirate was in sight. The young captain made the shifts for the ship so the crew could sleep. The early morning shift was his and his first mate's shift and they watched the sun rising. And with the sun sails were seen on the horizon. Naruto shouted alarm and soon his crew was up. For the blonde the sight of these particular sails was horrible. The Jolly Roger of his uncle Shanks laughed at him dangerously and he jumped to the Den Den Mushi to inform the admirals. But nobody picked his call up. Chester, turn the ship around. That's Red Hair Shanks and the Red Force. We have no chance against that ship. Naruto yelled and his navigator turned the steering wheel. The Red Force closed the distance fast and was followed by a fleet of pirate ships, all of them bigger than the Silent Hunter. Naruto prayed that his uncle wouldn't open fire until they were secure in the rows of the admiral ships. He looked hopefully to the big ships of the marine. They came fast and would soon confront the pirates. But suddenly the crew of the Silent Hunter was shook up by the crash of cannonballs into their ship. And the pirates didn't open fire. It was one of the Commodore's ships that fired on them. Panic disturbed the crew and Naruto couldn't get them back under command. Another cannonball hit them from the marine ships and destroyed the ship body underneath the waterline. The blonde looked hopeless to his uncle, but he knew he would die with his crew. Another cannonball brought the Silent Hunter to her knees and the small scouting ship sank with her crew. Shanks couldn't believe what happened. They had seen the small ship that the Marines sent out and laughed. That was a lifeboat for a ship like his Red Force. He had to admit that the crew was brave enough to sail head first into their doom. The red-haired pirate would have made sure to send the poor souls back to Marineford until they could get a bigger ship than that nutshell. He remembered the letter that Rayleigh Silvers had sent him from his nephew that he made it to Captain. Shanks wasn't happy that Kushina and Minato let their son go to the Marines, but they were family and family stuck together. And to achieve captain rank so soon within the Marines was rare. He was proud that his nephew would soon start to convince the world government that pirates and Marines could live with each other. The Marines would hold the seas clean from criminals and the others could do whatever they wanted. He hoped that Naruto didn't know that poor souls on the small ship, because he wouldn't hear the end of that if the blonde found out about that. His crew laughed when the small ship turned on spot and sailed back to the Marine fleet. Good decision. Shanks watched in amusement how the Silent Hunter, Usopp had told him the name when he could read it their stern, returned to the fleet. His smugness vanished the moment the fleet attacked their members. The wind carried the panicked cries of the crew and the desperately commands of the young captain to them. But they were silenced when another cannonball hit the small ship. Shit, Beckman whispered next to his captain, who nodded. Why would they do that to their own? Usopp asked and lowered his head. To blame us. We are also in fire range. Shanks growled and they attacked. The end of all was that the Marines had to swallow a defeat by the bigger fleet of pirates and they fled. No other ship was completely destroyed during the whole fight, but a lot of pieces swam in the sea. Shanks looked for the remains of the Silent Hunter, but the ship sank completely and most likely took everything with her. They prayed for the men. Namikaze Minato sighed into his cup of morning coffee. He sat on the deck of his ship Hirishin and read the newest newspaper. He snorted at the news about pirates being two and some news about small criminals. His biggest interest laid on the news about the fight that his brother-in-law fought near the Sabaody archipelago. The Navy complained about pirates winning the whole thing and that one of their newest captains was killed in action. Minato frowned at the thought of a green captain dying so soon. His own son just became captain. We will remember the brave actions of the crew of the Silent Hunter who took fatal hits from the Red Force herself. Captain Uzumaki Naruto didn't stand a chance against Yonko, Shanks and his crew. Minato's blood froze at the thought of his son being dead. He couldn't believe it. He just got the message from Son that they were assigned to their first mission and it was his own uncle that killed him. Fury spiked within him and his Haoshoku haki let the newer members of his crew crumble like burning leaves. He stormed to his Den Den Mushi to call Shanks. He prayed that the news was fake. Shanks responded to his call and Minato growled furiously. Shanks, did you shot the Silent Hunter? He asked in heavy breaths. He trembled in anger and fear for his son. Hello to you too, Minato. How is my little sis doing? Still nagging on your crew? Shanks greeted and ignored the question. Answer, damn it Shanks. The newspaper reports that the Silent Hunter sank in your battle with the Marines. Naruto was on that ship. Minato barked and hoped that his normally playful brother-in-law could see why he was so angry. Silence. Shit. Does Kushina know? You know me, Minato. I wouldn't shoot on Marines that surrendered. These Marine pigs shot on their own ship to blame us. I didn't know that the Silent Hunter was Naruto's ship. It's gone, Minato. We searched for survivors but the ship took everything with her into the sea. I am on my way. Kushina is going to be mad. Minato swallowed the lump in his throat. Tears streamed down his cheek. It was his own fault that he allowed Naruto to go to the Marines. He truly hoped that their son could bring the change there. We'll wait for you, Shanks. Kushina is going to need you too. Minato said shakily and put the Den Den Mushi away. Like an undead he walked to his quarters where Kushina still slept. He sat himself on the edge and slowly shook his darling wife awake. Her red hair surrounded her like a halo. She smiled at him and opened one eye. "It's too early, Minato Koi." She mumbled and tried to get him into an embrace. "Kushina, please, something happened. You have to listen to me," he said, his normally soft voice trembling. She was wide awake the next second. Shanks met them half a week later and comforted his sister. Kushina still denied the fact that her poor baby died on the sea. The red-haired pirates and the Flash pirates held a sea burial for their fallen brother, son, nephew and friend. It is like being stabbed in the back when you turn around. Naruto knew that he had no chance against our fleet and turned around. It was already brave enough of him to sail on that nutshell of a scouting ship in front of the Marines. Shanks told his side of the story. He knew that would fuel the pirates' hate on the Marines and he hoped that they could pay the fleet admiral back for what they had done to one of their own. The two Yonkos were on warpath and they wouldn't stop until the Marines paid. Air. He coughed up a lot of water. He needed air. Crocally he opened one clear blue eye and saw that he was washed ashore on a beach. He was alive. Another coughing fit shook him and he hacked up a lot of seawater. How long did he lay here? Naruto cried in happiness. He was truly alive. He could feel the sun burning on his back. Slowly he stood up. His lips were dry and he was thirsty. Seawater took its tribute fast. And the blonde captain was hungry. In front of him was a forest and he truly hoped that he could find some fresh water and food in there. He dragged himself into the cool shadows of the high trees and used a trick he learned from one of his dad's crew members. He forced a bit of his life energy into his nose and sniffed the air. He smelled salt and the beach, the trees and some animals. But he found a source of clear water and stumbled over some fallen trees to reach it. His thirst stilled. Naruto searched for food. Soon he found the faint smell of a village. Where people lived there was food. Following his nose he found himself in front of high walls. There was a gate and he entered it. The young captain was happy that he carried a small wallet with money in his pockets. He had long lost his coat but he carried another small wallet in his boots. Something his mother taught him early in life when pirates tended to rob other pirates more often. After he ate he sat on the bar chair and brooded. He didn't know how to continue. He had no ship, no crew, may the gods bless the poor souls, and little money left. "Sir, can I help you with something?" the chef asked him concerned. "Do you know how I can get some money? I am shipwrecked and lost here. I can fight if I have to but I just need a place to stay and some food." He sighed but the man nodded. "Go to the tower in the center of the village and ask for a meeting with our leader. He may have a position for you since you are capable to fight but you seem to be a bit young. Maybe he'll send you to the academy, till you prove yourself," he said and smiled at the young captain. Naruto was thankful that the man helped him and went to the tower. He had to wait an hour or two but that was nothing for a captain who had to endure calms which lasted days. But eventually the leader of the town found time for him and greeted the newcomer. He was an old man but he gave off a powerful aura. Naruto bowed to him. The man laughed and said he should cut the formal crap. "Boy, your age is too young to be that formal. Not even my own Jonins are that respectful to me until I need them for missions or reports." The old leader said and gestured to him that he should take a seat. "Now tell me what brought you on my humble island. By the way, my name is Sarutobi Hiruzen. I am the Hokage of Konohagakure. Call me whatever you want," he said warmly and Naruto smiled. "Is it okay when I call you Gigi?" "Never had grandfather," the blonde asked cheekily and the old leader just laughed. "If you wish. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I came here because my ship was wrecked. I am, first was Marine captain fresh out of the academy. My own people shot on my ship. We were a fresh crew sent to our death. I have nowhere to go until I get a new ship or someone could take me to my family. Until then I would offer my service to your village." Naruto told him the short vision of his story. "A marine him? So you were taught how to fight. Say, do you know how to use haki?" the old leader asked curiously but Naruto shook his head. "Vice Admiral Garp says that my haki power lays dormant within me until I am forced to use them. I had no need to until now to awake my haki," the young captain said and Sarutobi seemed to be happy about that fact. "That is good. Everybody on this island has the chance to awaken his haki if they wish that. Don't be so surprised. Haki is within everybody but only a small percentage can activate the Haoshoku haki. We don't use just our willpower but our life force too and together we call that power chakra. I know what you want to ask. Why don't we fight in the world? You need to know that we shinobi became rare. Konohagakure is the last standing shinobi village at all. Your father, Namikaze Minato, took a lot of them with him to spread our teachings. Ah, I know who you were the moment you entered my office, Namikaze D. Naruto. The old man chuckled at the muffled face of the youngster who flashed red and bowed his head. Sarutobi lighted his pipe and exhaled the smoke. I also knew that you carry more than the will of D. The curse of the Uzumaki is sealed deep inside of you and you never touched it. That's good too. And your life force is strong. Maybe stronger than my own. You are lucky that these years' batch of academy students just started their training and didn't go over the awakening of Haki. I'll put you in Iruka's class and you'll get a student loan until you finish your studies. Sarutobi explained to him and Naruto awed at the plan. Sir, sorry Gigi, what do you wish for my services? I am thankful but nothing comes without a cost. Naruto asked and hoped the old man's demands wouldn't be ridiculous. You are already trained as captain unlike your father who I needed to groom to a leader. I'll give you the same task like your father. You already possess the will of D. I'll teach you the will of fire. Teach the people out of here our ways. The batch of students you'll take with you is the last one we can teach. The other families already moved away from here. Claim this island as your home and make it famous. Maybe then we can teach new kids. Sarutobi sighed. He hoped that the young man would be the one that could help them to become great again. Naruto smiled. He liked the idea of a permanent safe haven. His parents' ship was his only home and they were permanently moving. A place to settle down after the great adventure would be nice. I'll do it, old man. No problem, Naruto said eagerly and grinned. It was so easy to forget the hardly trained manners of the Marines. He was never one to follow the rules. 2 years into the academy didn't teach Naruto much. He was good with the academics but not superb. He was on top of the battle classes since he already learned how to fight with a sword or hand-to-hand combat thanks to his connections. But he was more interested into the Haki classes. Beside that he found great friends. There were Kiba and Akamaru. Kiba was a typical fighter and beast tamer. He joked a lot and he was immature like hell. Then there was Shikamaru. A great tactician and someone who was well versed as navigator but he seems to prefer to sleep and calling everything troublesome. His best friend Choji was the tank of their friends. A big-boned young man with an appetite for a whole crew but he was an excellent chef. Their best friend was Ino. She was a master of Kenbunshoku Haki because their family taught them early into the skills of mind reading. Sakura, a girl with pink hair, was an excellent combat medic and doctor. She could use her chakra to double her strength and destroy boulders like nothing. Then there was Hinata. She was the best hand-to-hand combat fighter with chakra in their class. She also took care of them like a mother hen. Shino was one of the first of their group that used devil's fruit powers. A devil fruit that went through the Aburame family ever since their founding. The Logia-type fruit Kakaichu no Mi that turned the user into a swarm of insects. Shino could dry his targets dry of their life force and destroy unknown by the enemy whole ships thanks to this power. The last of their class was Naruto's best friend and rival, Sasuke Uchiha, the second user of a devil's fruit which was also from his clan. The Paramecia devil fruit Sharingan no Mi. Model Susanoo gave the black-haired Uchiha the power to force his own life force out of his body to create an energy shield that could take the shape of a warrior or skeleton around him. He also could use the energy as weapons. Sasuke was the best swordsman of their group and even beat him once or twice in a spar. That Teme was an arrogant bastard but he accepted Naruto as their unofficial leader even if it seems that they hated each other with all their bickering. Naruto smiled at the thought of his original 8 friends. They were the perfect crew but they still missed a scout, a shipwright and a sharpshooter. These roles were filled by Hinata's cousin Neji and his friends Lee and Tenten. Neji was a bastard like Sasuke but he always thought that everything was decided by fate until Naruto gave him a major beat-up. He was the scout of their group thanks to the range his sight reached. Lee was always full of energy. Thanks to a condition of his he couldn't use his life force to fuel his haki and was the only one who couldn't use chakra but it made him to a great combat specialist and a prodigy of hard work. Lee claimed the position of the shipwright as soon as he caught wind of it. Tenten was excellent with all kind of weapons and got every target. She claimed the position as sharpshooter with joy. They knew that they would move from their homeland to see the world and to fight. Most of them shared Naruto's dislike against the Marines after he told them his story, but they agreed not to fight the Marines openly. Together they were 12 young pirates ready to start their journey. The village of Konohagakure gifted them with a ship that made the captain proud. The Hai no Ishi was a ship that could match against his uncle's Red Force. Their Jolly Roger showed the traditional skull wearing a headband with the symbol of Konoha. Behind the skull katana crossed, a part of the symbol that Sasuke wished. They set sails the first time the day after they graduated. Konoha's population waved them off from the port and soon the frigate entered the sea. Naruto took a deep breath of sea air and he could feel that he was still needed out there. Arashi no Namikaze Naruto entered the game. They traveled the Grand Line for nearly 2 years. The Konoha pirates didn't sail to the New World. No, Naruto planned to reach his parents for the first time in over 3 years. He had celebrated more than 5 birthdays away from them and they most likely thought that he was dead after the attack on the Silent Hunter. There was a rumor that the Yonkos held a meeting near Alabasta to discuss the current situation against the world government. Naruto stood on the figurehead of the Hai no Ishi, a snarling fox, and thought about everything that happened. They had fought against a lot of Marines and rogue pirates and took names. He didn't know if they had already reached enough attention that a bounty was put on their heads because they never stayed long enough to be bothered by bounty hunters and most of them changed a lot after they became true pirates. He himself stood 6'9" feet, 2.1 meters, tall and had his messy blonde hair with red streaks spiked wildly in all directions. Only his Konoha headband kept his unruly hair out of his face. He wore a reddish-orange coat over a black shirt and black trousers. He also wore an orange sash as belt and steel-toed black boots. Most of them changed their wardrobe like he did. Sasuke even let his hair grow out so it reached his shoulders and covered his left eye. The others changed more subtle and looked more like pirates than island inhabitants. Captain Dobi. Sasuke interrupted his musings with a small smile on his lips. Teme, what's up? Naruto asked and gave off a wide yawn. Manners, dope. Didn't your mother teach you manners? Hyuga can see the coast of the Alabasta Kingdom. We are heading to Nanohana to fill up our resources. The crew would like to stay a day or two to write their families. Sasuke informed him and Naruto nodded. As long as we find a safe place for the Hai no Ishi there should be no problem to stay longer. The blonde said with a smile and looked to the horizon. He could see some buildings in the port. Lee steered their ship to a hidden bay. The blonde looked surprised that another ship was here but the single flag that blew in the wind showed that these were pirates. Kiba, Shino, Hinata. Naruto called his friends. They were his tracking team thanks to Kiba's partner Akamaru, Hinata's eyesight that was nearly as good as Neji's and Shino's insects. But today he needed them for guarding the ship. He knew these three would be disappointed that they had to stay on the ship but they would have the first right for leaving the ship next time. He explained the situation to them and they understood. In a dangerous situation these three could move the Hai no Ishi to another spot and send Akamaru to get them. The other 9 pirates took off to the shore and walked from there to the city. Nanohana was big and a typical desert city. The group walked through the street together until they found a spot where they could meet again. From that place one could see the open sea easily and the rest of a wall was a good mark. Naruto took a knife and grooved their symbol in the stone. When something happens, flare your chakra. We'll meet ASAP here when things become too dangerous. I don't want to lose any one of you to the Marines. Naruto ordered and the group nodded to their captain. Then they parted and the reddish-blonde captain sighed. Time for food. He followed his nose to a restaurant named Spice Bean and seated himself on a bar chair. He ignored the sleeping girl next to him. The other guest said that she was dead but he knew better. The girl was just sleeping. That happened on his ship regularly. Chef, do you serve ramen? The young captain asked and shook the staring man out of his shook. Yes, good. 10 bowls ASAP. Naruto demanded with a smile and the chef sighed. Naruto took his waiting time and studied the girl next to him. She was still sleeping. A orange hat rested on her back with 2 smileys, one frowning and one smiling face. The girl herself had short messy black hair and wore a necklace with pearls. She had a tattoo on her left arm with the letters ASCUKA. The S was crossed out and replaced by a C. Suddenly she awoke and Naruto snorted. The chef put the first bowl in front of him and he started to eat. The men in the restaurant that believed that the girl was dead shrieked that her acting was nonsense, but the black-haired girl ignored them, peacefully eating her food again. "Say chef, do you know that man?" she asked and showed the man a wanted poster. Naruto glanced at it out of the corner of his eyes and snorted again. "A straw hat. No, he never came here. His ship is in the hidden bay." Naruto interrupted him and looked now directly at the girl. She clearly was a pirate, so she should know that place. Out of the sudden something crashed into the restaurant and took the girl with it. Naruto shrugged. Ignoring the new hole in the restaurant wall, he continued to eat his bowls. The newcomer took the chair next to him and demanded everything eatable. The blonde captain snorted again and glanced at the straw hat. That was the infamous Monkey D. Luffy. Well, now he had seen it all. The guy ate so fast and without any manners, even Naruto became sick from watching him. The chef gaped at Luffy and tried to convince him that he should go because someone searched after him. Luffy looked to the hole in the wall and asked why it was there. The whole restaurant facepalmed at him. The blonde took a sniff of the air and shuddered. "Smoke. A lot of smoke. Thanks for the meal, old man. That should be enough to pay my meal and that from the girl in the wall," Naruto said, and paid a good worth of money. The blonde tried to walk outside, but at the next moment he was hit by something. Groaning, he looked up and grumbled something about stupid straw hats. A marine officer was hot on the heels of the young raven-haired pirate. "Luffy, wait!" the girl cried and jumped over him. Naruto had enough. He wanted to know what was happening and followed them. "Search your own place, Moosehead and crew." Sasuke growled at the swordsman. The crew came back to the meeting place when they saw that the whole village was overrun by marines. "We were here first," the one with the long nose cried unhappily, but the 8 crew members of the Konoha pirates knew better. Shikamaru was the first to appear here before the strangers took their place. "Troublesome, we left a mark here. Search your own place, we are waiting for our captain." "So do we. Can we just share the place?" a tall blonde asked and looked over the other crew. They had more fighters than they and were older. Something cried dangerous. "Sasuke, stand down. Let them stay with us. There is no need to fight." Ino growled at her comrade. The Uchiha snorted and leaned on the wall. Suddenly a cry let the Straw Hat Pirates look up. That could only be their captain. And that dumbass leaded the Marines directly to them. What an idiot. "Scatter and meet up at the High no Ishi. We are going to send Akamaru after him," Shikamaru ordered. He knew he had no right to order them as the second mate. The right went to Sasuke without Naruto because the raven-haired Uchiha was the first mate, but Sasuke accepted the command and vanished. The Straw Hat Pirates were awed by the sight and sighed. Why didn't they scatter like them? Smoker attacked Luffy directly, who desperately tried to flee from the Marine captain, but 2 other forces intercepted the attack. "Your smoke is nothing against my fire, Smoker," the tattooed girl said smugly. "And my wind is blowing you away. Try not to be too sad, but today you are not getting any pirate." The red blonde man snarled at the Marine captain. He knew Smoker than anyone. He picked a lot on him during his time in the Marine Academy. The Straw Hat Pirates were awed by the power of these 2. "Asuka, you are here?" Luffy asked his sister, who grinned brightly at her brother. "You didn't change at all, Luffy." She laughed and her flames burned brighter. Naruto watched the whole scene. Wind blades licking on his skin, ready to strike again, and he smiled at that sight. "Asuka, did you eat a devil fruit?" Luffy asked, and the blonde captain shook his head. "I don't want to interrupt a family meeting, but Smoker is still here and Marines are incoming." Naruto barked, and these 2 interrupted their nonsense to blink at him. "Monkey D. Luffy, you and your crew should flee. I am holding them off for a while. And I am helping," Asuka declared prideful. The Straw Hats scattered and left them behind. "By the way, my name is Namikaze D. Naruto," the blonde said, and the Marines gasped. Some of them knew him as Uzumaki Naruto, but now they are facing each other as enemies. "Get out of my way, Fire Fist Portgas D. Asuka," stormed Namikaze. "I am after the Straw Hats." Smoker growled, but Asuka set the whole place in flames. Her inferno burned brightly and Naruto fueled the flames with his wind. Asuka smirked at him and they attacked. A firestorm overruled the smoke and they sent Smoker away, bruised and badly burned. "You are a good tag team partner, but I need to meet with Luffy," Asuka said to him, and Naruto snorted. "I am going with you." My crew scattered thanks to the air for head and is waiting most likely at the same place as the Straw Hats. Naruto told her and she shrugged. Together they jumped over some house roofs and found the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. Asuka and Luffy bickered a bit and were happy to see each other again. Naruto silently followed them and Luffy told Asuka and him about his crew until he noticed the blonde. "Who are you again?" Luffy asked and the blonde captain snickered. "Captain Namikaze D. Naruto. I am captain of the Konoha Pirates and my ship is at the same place as yours. So I decided to follow you too." "That's so cool. You are a captain too?" Luffy awed and both Asuka and Naruto laughed. "I already said that, Rubber Man. Never saw a devil fruit user like you." "A paramecia?" Naruto asked and Luffy nodded. "And you are a Logia-type devil fruit user. Good to know somebody like you. Even better that you are on our side, Airhead." Asuka chipped in and Naruto's sweat dropped. "Ya no, Flame Chick, without my wind your flames couldn't exist." "Why you?" Naruto growled when she hit her elbow in his stomach. "Call me Flame Chick again and I am going to burn you." She playfully winked and Naruto muttered some curses. Luffy found his ship when they reached the coast already sailing away and he used his devil fruit power to reach his crew. He forgot Asuka who cursed at her brother. "I am going to bring you to him. Follow me, my ship isn't far away," Naruto declared and led her to the High no Ishi. He smirked when she awed at his ship. He liked the fiery temperament of the girl and was happy to help her. "Naruto, good that you are here." Hinata greeted him and the blonde nodded. "Set sails, guys, we have a ship to catch. Asuka here needs a ride to the ship of her brother." They soon reached their pace and followed the smaller ship of the Straw Hat Pirates. Asuka sat on the bow rail and watched in awe how smooth the big ship cruised over the waves. Only minutes later they reached the Going Merry and the Straw Hats were amazed by their fellow pirates' ship. "I said my sis is cool," Luffy declared and the other pirates' sweat dropped. "It's our time to move, Straw Hats. I need to meet up with the Yonkos." "Catch," Naruto told them and threw a white sheet of paper to them. "That is a Vivre card. If you ever need mine or my crew's help that card is going to lead you to me. My home is the Grand Line. I sailed these waters already as a kid so consider us as help and allies." Naruto told Luffy and was about to give the commands to his crew but he was interrupted. "You are meeting with the Yonkos? Can you tell Whitebeard that I am still following the trail to Blackbeard?" Asuka asked him. "You should talk to himself. You need a bigger ship than the nutshell you bound on my ship to follow Blackbeard. Last time I heard that he was at the Sabaody archipelago. That was half a week ago." The blonde captain said and Asuka sighed. "I am sorry Luffy, I am not going to travel with you. I really need to find Blackbeard." The girl said and gave her brother her own Vivre card. "You'll find me again. We'll meet sooner or later. Keep you and your crew safe," Asuka said and jumped back on the High no Ishi. She waved her brother off and turned to the stunned crew. "So, we've got a blind passenger?" Sasuke snorted and Naruto threw a curse at the swordsman who shrugged it off. "Welcome on my ship, Asuka. The Will of Fire is your home until we reach the Yonkos." Naruto welcomed her and the crew and they opened the booze. It was a good day for the Konoha Pirates. Asuka knew that the Yonkos wouldn't meet at Alabasta because Whitebeard told her that she could meet them in Drum. It wasn't that far to sail to the Winter Island. Asuka liked how the crew was like a family. They bickered and fought a lot. These 12 pirates remembered her of Whitebeard and her own crew, only that Naruto was their leader and didn't throw the overboard in a fit. Naruto was happy to have somebody else than Sasuke willingly to fight against him and his devil fruit power. He had to experiment a lot with his wind to not accidentally snuff out Asuka's flames completely and taking her breathing air. But the girl was stubborn and fought with everything she had. Once Naruto needed to put her out with a directed blast of Haoshoku Haki to stop her flames catching his ship. That was the first and last time he warned the woman that she needed to keep her temper in check. Asuka held great respect. Nobody fought her off as easily as the blonde, not even his other crew members, and every one of them were incredibly strong. She didn't know if the young captain could match Whitebeard's power, but she believed that the only thing that would hinder the boy was his experience. The weather became colder and she took a walk on deck of the ship when most of the crew was under deck, sleeping, training or reading. She was surprised to find Naruto sitting in the figurehead of his ship and walked up to him. The blonde, with the red streaks in his hair, seemed to meditate. She waited for him to notice her. You know, if I didn't know it better, I would demand that you would get back under deck. But you are a living heater." He snickered and she smirked. Says the airhead that can condition himself in the desert. She bit back and they laughed, but she became once again concerned. "Why are you sitting out here? Shouldn't you be with your crew?" She asked him and he shook his head. "Sometimes it is better for me to take my time out. I love them with all my heart, but the wind is always on the run. It feels too closed in there. The wind cannot be contained, just like the sea or wildfire. I need to meditate whenever my power gets a better of me. And it is the only time I can think about everything without concerning my friends." "Thinking about what?" she asked curiously and regretted the question as soon as it left her. That was a too personal question. "About my family, my career, how I ended up becoming a pirate. You should know I never wished to become a pirate at all." He told her. Naruto told her his story from his childhood to the day they met in Alabasta. Asuka somehow is touched, and when she saw the small marine tattoo on the shoulder of her new friend that someone tried to claw off, she shuddered. And then, she told him her own story. "It must be good to know your parents." Asuka sighed and Naruto snorted. "My mom is a hothead. You and her would be good friends. My dad concerns too much in the world politics and my uncle is a goofball in disguise of a pirate leader. I should have listened to them. Then a crew full of good men wouldn't be gone." The blonde captain said and looked up into the clear blue sky that started to darken. "But without these experiences you would have never meet your friends. One door closed, another one opened. Be happy with everything you have," she said and patted her temporarily captain's back. Naruto smiled at her and waved her off. "Our captain is head over heels into the fire chick." Ino squealed and danced around the table. The crew was happy that their friend found someone. All girls on their ship were already in relationships. Hinata and Kiba, Ino and Choji, and the last couple were Sasuke and Sakura. The other males didn't bother to get a girlfriend because most of the already had their liaisons back home. The only really single on was their captain. "Ino, be quiet," Sasuke moaned. The Uchiha had a bit too much booze the day before and still nursed his headache because Sakura denied him to heal a headache. But it is true. See, they're talking a lot to each other and he smiles at her. Not the normal cheeky smile. It is a smile full of love, she said. The crew rolled their eyes and ate in silence. They reached Drum and Naruto smiled at the sight of the Red Force and the Hirishin. His own ship was docked next to these two and Naruto puffed his chest. The Hai no Ishi was a sight by herself and for him she outclassed the other ships. "Airhead, stop a-weeing at your ship and walk. It is freaking cold out here." Sakura growled at him and he dodged a swing directed at his head. "Ah, Sakura, look at the sight. Ya no, we'll maybe never see the Red Force, the Hirishin and the Hai no Ishi in the same port again." He whined and she whacked her captain. "Move," Sasuke barked and they walked into the city. They just had to follow the biggest noise in the village to find the Yonkos. They had rented a tavern and now the crew members wrecked it. "Kiba, behave," the blonde demanded when the feral man's eyes glinted in joy. Naruto bit back his anger because Asuka had left them as soon as she spotted a fellow whitebeard pirate. Naruto entered the tavern and was followed by his crew. He felt the glances off the other crews and he searched for familiar faces. Soon he found the masked one of Kakashi, his adopted brother. The silver-haired man looked up from his cards when a shadow fell over his table. "Can I help you? That is a private gathering," Kakashi asked and let one hand wander to his tanto. "I am hurt, Aniki. I am truly hurt. Don't ya remember me?" The blonde said in a faked hurt tone and grinned widely. "Naruto." The silver-haired pirate breathed when he saw the marks on the blonde's cheeks. "You are alive. You are truly alive. Your father never tried to hope that the pirate that named himself Namikaze D. Naruto would be you. He thought you died near Sabaody Archipelago," the man said and hugged his little brother. "Are we welcome now? My friends are tired and would like to have one or another round of good old alcohol." The blonde captain asked and Kakashi nodded. The crew scattered and took their places around, playing cards or bickering with other pirates. Naruto seated himself next to Kakashi and stretched his leg underneath the table. "It is truly good to see you again," Kakashi mumbled and Naruto nodded. "It is good to be back." They sat in silence and watched the crews fooling around, waiting that their captains came back. The first captain that appeared was Kaido, who gathered his crew and left ASAP. Naruto ignored it and waited for the next. Whitebeard marched through the tavern and was happy to find his daughter back in his crew. He and his pirates went to one corner of the inn and talked to each other. That only left Shanks and Minato's crew with Naruto's own. The other captains took their sweet time and Naruto decided to doze off. Shanks' forehead wrinkled at the sight of people he had never seen. He found 12 people that didn't belong to the Yonko crews, but when his sight landed on a whiskered man that dozed next to Kakashi, his concern vanished. "Kushine, look who is here to greet us." Shanks whispered in his sister's ear and gestured to Kakashi's table. The redhead's eyes widened at the sight of her son, who she believed was dead until now. Shanks gestured to her to silently get Minato and she nodded. The older Uzumaki gestured to Kakashi to leave, which the scarecrow did willingly and seated himself next to his nephew. Soon a wide-eyed Minato and a giggling Kushina followed his lead and they sat at the table. Shanks saw the 11 interested glances of the unknown crew and smirked at them. "Naruto, wake up or your mom is going to kick your ass." Shanks barked out and the blonde nearly jumped. "No, please Kami, not the cold water mom." Naruto screamed out and everybody in the tavern barked in laughter. Naruto glared at the usual idiots of his crew, but he felt the aura of a lot of people he knew and missed. "I am going to kill you, Shanks." The tall young blonde growled and elbowed his laughing uncle. Naruto turned to his mom and dad and his hard glance softened. He had missed them so much. Kushina nearly threw the table away to reach her son and she hugged him. Minato was included into the embrace and smiled softly at his family. As soon as everything settled, Naruto told his tale to his family and introduced his crew. Most of them weren't too eager to greet the two Yonkos and Kushina personally, so they only waved when their name came up. "What happened to your hair, Naruto? Don't tell me that you are dyeing it," Kushina asked sternly, but the blonde held his hands in surrender. "The red streaks came after I awakened my haki. They are naturally, Mom. Shouldn't you be glad that I got something from you?" Naruto asked and she shook her head. Kushina doesn't want her Sochi as a redhead. "I am hurt, Kushi. My crew is named the Red-Haired Pirates," Shanks said in a mock-hurt tone and snickered only to be smacked by his sister. "That is your own fault. You clearly didn't choose the right name." She growled at her childish brother and waved him off. Shanks cried and the two blonde captains laughed at him. Suddenly Edward, Whitebeard, Newgate stood at their table and grabbed the youngest blonde by his coat. The Konoha pirates jumped up from their seats and readied their weapons, but Naruto gestured them to stay put. "You are the guy that helped Asuka in Alabasta and brought her back?" Newgate asked Naruto, who nodded and slowly gathered his devil fruit power. The tiny wind blades didn't do much to the hard skin of the old pirate and he scoffed. "That would be me. Please let me down. There are 3 crews ready to strike and I don't want to cause a national conflict." Naruto asked the tall man, who led him back to his feet. The blonde took a deep breath and faced the strongest man alive. "I want a simple match, boy. Just to see how powerful the next generation of captains is." Edward asked and Naruto nodded against his mother's wish. "Edward, please reconsider. I don't want to pick my son up in pieces." Minato tried to get the other Yonko out of his funk, but the tall Whitebeard ignored his fellow Yonko and led their groups out of the tavern to a frozen lake that gave enough space for them. Shanks just patted Minato's should, but the blonde captain growled at him. "Relax, Minato. Both of them have to limit their powers because they are standing on a lake. Whitebeard just wants to test him. And Whitebeard's devil fruit is weaker than Naruto's Logia type. He cannot hurt your son physical," Shanks explained, but the blonde Yonko still scowled at the sight. Naruto was surrounded by his friends. They have him tips that he didn't really need it or encouraged him to give his best. He would make them proud. Their concern warmed him and he smiled at every single one of them. Sasuke even gave him his trusted sword since Naruto let his own on the ship. The Kusanagi was a tad too light for the blonde, but he could handle the katana since he and Sasuke tended to switch blades whenever they needed a heavier or lighter sword. He smiled when his wind element surrounded the already sharp blade and sharpened even more. Naruto looked up to Whitebeard, who was twice as tall as himself, and swallowed the lump in his throat. That would be a fight he was going to remember. "Ready?" Kakashi asked the two of them and received nods. He jumped out of the way and both pirates attacked. Edward's Basento clashed against Naruto's katana and the younger boy had to force a lot of power in his muscles to hold Whitebeard's strike, but the blonde grinned smugly when his wind grooved sharp edges into the blade of the other weapon. With a dark glow and another push of power he destroyed it and got a surprised cry from the watchers. "Nobody could ruin my weapon until now," Edward muttered and threw the rest of his Basento away. They switched to hand-to-hand combat, Naruto's personal favorite way to fight, and charged their punches with their Busashoku haki. The blonde smirked, dodged Whitebeard's attack, and in the last moment a dagger made out of wind appeared in his hand and he slashed at Newgate's bare chest. First blood was his. "Enough. You showed me enough. Let's stop here before someone is getting hurt." Edward barked and he jumped back, the wind vanishing around his body. The blonde nodded thankfully for the fight and sighed. It took a lot out of him and he needed to go back on chakra to hold Whitebeard's attacks at an equal term. The young blonde man knew that he wouldn't hold a candle to the experienced pirate in a real fight. The man had seen 3 times more of the sea in his 72 years and still could fight like his prime. The Konoha pirates cheered for their captain and even the other crews clapped for the achievement that the youngest captain of these 3 could match with Whitebeard. Naruto smiled brightly and let his crew fuss around him. He gave Sasuke his katana back. The raven-haired swordsman nodded in silent approval, and bickered with Kiba that the fight wasn't as easy as it looked like. Then Whitebeard approached them again and smiled. The new thin wound that Naruto left in the man's chest wasn't bandaged but it already stopped to bleed. All of the Konoha pirates knew that a small wound like that didn't bother the tall man. It was just a scratch, but the strongest pirate alive was proud that a pirate of the new generation was able to get first blood in a sparring match. A promising young captain nonetheless. "I approve your strength, Arashi no Namikaze. And I want you to take Asuka with you," Newgate said and shocked his own pirates and the Konoha crew. "Father?" Asuka yelled but was ignored. "I know about her plan to catch Blackbeard, but I am not willingly to let a brat drag me around the globe for petty revenge. You on the other hand seems to like herding cats." Whitebeard laughed about his own joke and got a growl and a bark from Akamaru and Kiba. "My crew is my family, Whitebeard. I endure them and they endure me." The blonde laughed back and ignored the protesting yells of his friends. "That's the spirit." Edward sighed and pushed Asuka on the side of the Konoha pirates. "We'll see each other again, Asuka. Maybe then you can match me a bit more," Whitebeard said and left. Asuka cried when she saw her old captain leave and Naruto comforted her in promising her that they would meet them again. The crews moved back to their ships and Naruto laughed at the faces his parents and his uncle made when they saw the Hai no Ishi. His ship was still the most beautiful ship in the harbor. He commanded that his crew would ready the ship because they would leave the haven by midnight. Shanks walked next to him and snickered. From a nutshell to a ship worth for the next king of the seas. What a beauty. But what is up with the name? Hai no Ishi? Shanks asked confused and Naruto smiled. "I am the wind to fan the will of fire. I am watching and defending my precious people and only together we can illuminate the world. It is a believing from the people in Konoha, the village I ended up after I shipwrecked. It may seem bold but I claimed that island and hopefully when my adventure ends I can settle down there. It is a beautiful place." Naruto told him and the red-haired pirate nodded. With Asuka, Shanks nagged and Naruto blushed, which only increased Shanks' laughing fit. "I hate you," Naruto said. Naruto growled and tried to walk away but Shanks stopped him. "Here, take this with you and raise the flag. It gives you my protection on the sea," Shanks explained and gave the blonde a small flag with the red-haired pirate's Jolly Roger, but Naruto shook his head and gave it back to his uncle. "I am my own man now, Shanks. I'll not sail under another pirate's flag for all the money and protection one could promise me," the proud young captain said and walked to his ship. With a gust of wind the blonde appeared on the figurehead of the Hai no Ishi and waved him his goodbye. Shanks sighed but watched the young crew leaving the port. He hoped he would see his nephew again. The Hai no Ishi sailed peacefully through the day. Their course would bring them near the Sabaody archipelago where the last sign of Blackbeard's crew was seen. Until then the crew relaxed or did what they usually did. Sasuke was somewhere under deck and trained his swordsmanship to stay as sharp as his blade. The raven-haired man wasn't one to slack off like Shikamaru. Said man relaxed on some bedrolls, they normally used when they stayed on land longer than a few hours, behind the steering wheel and gazed into the sky. The navigator called it cloud watching. Next to Shikamaru relaxed his best buddy and the cook of the crew Choji, happily munching his usual chips. Neji and Lee sparred on the main deck and Kiba was the referee. Akamaru slept next to his master and growled in his sleep, most likely hunting cats. Most of the girls sat in their usual gossip round on the bow deck of the ship. Only Asuka didn't know what to do. She still needed to expand her friendship with them, but it felt like that wouldn't happen anytime soon. The only one she could connect to was the captain, and she didn't know where Naruto was. The raven-haired girl sighed and decided she could use a bit of sleep herself. The best place would be the crow nest. To her surprise, someone already slept there and it answered her question where Naruto was. The captain slept bare-chested and peacefully, feet hanging over the crow nest rail and his headband, one she got herself some days ago, over his eyes. She fought against the blush that crept up her cheeks and climbed to the next crow nest of the mizzenmast. Unknown to her, the blonde only dozed in the sun. He felt her presence and his lips twitched into a smile when the air around the crown nest slightly heated up. But too soon the warmth left him and he sighed. He stretched and his toes splayed out. Yawning, he turned himself around and let the sun toast his back. Soon sleep claimed him again. An hour or two later, Shikamaru shouted for him and the blonde dragged himself down to his crew. Everybody gathered curiously around the navigator, who held a letter that was brought by a seabird to them. "It is a letter from Tamari. Read," his second mate demanded, and Naruto read over the letter from their neighbor island. After these few lines he growled and looked to Shikamaru. "Set course to Suna. We have to start a revolution," he ordered, and they nodded. The navigator went back to his steering wheel and the crew set full sails. Naruto watched like a hawk over his crew. Asuka came to him and wrinkled her forehead. "I thought we are sailing to Sabaody Archipelago?" she asked, irritated, and Naruto shook his head. "Friends of ours have problems with the Marines. They try to let a whole village starve to get their land for a new base. Not only our friends are in danger but our home port too, Asuka. If I need to wager your revenge against the safety of my people, I decide for my people." "I am sorry," the blonde captain explained to her, and wanted to meet Shikamaru to get a plan working for them, but Asuka rammed a fiery finger in his chest. "You promised me we would go after Blackbeard. Why waiting that he can escape again?" She growled and poked him again. He endured the burn, because his wind element wouldn't help against her fire, and starred her down. In his ears waves crashed and thunder boomed, his own anger getting a grip on him. Seawater crashed on deck and weakened both of them. Asuka spluttered and shook the water out of her hair, trying to heat herself up, but the sea was unforgiving to the evil fruit eater. "Do not anger me, Portgas d Asuka. I might be your friend, but I am your captain too. Blackbeard can wait. My ship is faster than his and we can catch him again. Until then, stay put." He growled deeply and she shook under the pressure he put on her mentally. Her eyes met his and she winced back from these slitted cold eyes that remembered her of a demon from Dandan's stories. Slowly she nodded and Naruto rushed away. Asuka stood there nearly half an hour, shivering in fear, and dripping from the seawater came out of nothing. She knew she shouldn't have tested his patience and help him instead. The crew already promised that they would help her with everything they had, but she needed to follow their captain's line of commands. Suddenly someone approached her and gave her a warm blanket. "Naruto is one of the best captains a young crew could wish," her fellow raven-haired said. Sasuke signed her to follow him under deck and she walked after him. "But when you anger him, you should jump overboard before he gets you. He puts family, friends and crew above himself, and these Suna idiots are friends and Tamari is Shikamaru's fiancé. That makes them family too. The next thing is the whole seawater thing. Naruto hates to fully use his power, but he could easily beat every devil fruit eater on the planet if he has to, because he is a true storm. You think he got his moniker Arashi no Namikaze because of the wind? Sorry to disappoint you, but he can call thunder and water too. He just prefers the wind because he thinks it is stealing from his dad if you use flashes, and I don't need to remember you that water is something he don't wish to control. It weakens him like every other devil fruit eater and is a last straw attack. That he called it because of you pushing your luck is meaning that he is hurt with your actions." Sasuke explained it to her and placed her next to the heater. Slowly but steady Asuka felt her powers return and she sighed. "Why? Why is he putting his crew above himself? She demanded to know, and the Uchiha sighed. He told you his story. We think that the hole that his first crew left in his heart is forcing him to fight for us like his own life isn't worth to survive without us. We'd do the same for him, but he doesn't need to know. Sasuke said and pushed a plate full of food to her. Eat. Choji doesn't mind as long as you don't eat the whole food supplies. He demanded from her, and she slowly began to eat. Approving, the Uchiha nodded and left her alone to ponder about what was said. The sun dawned at the horizon when she dared to come back on the main deck. The crew seemed to lazy around once again. Naruto sat on his usual spot on the figurehead and seemed to be concentrated. She walked up to him and leaned on the rail next to the snarling fox head. Asuka felt the wind carrying them fast, and the big ship pulled them through the sea. I am sorry that I snapped at you, the blonde said and opened one eye. Seawater is never a good feeling for one of us. The winds refused to answer me as long as I was dripping wet. He chuckled dryly. The raven-haired firewoman smiled warily and nodded. It felt so strange. I never felt so powerless. She grumbled and he nodded. I am sorry that I used my curse on you too. You shouldn't have seen that. He sighed and leaned back so he could see her more. A curse? She asked and knew that it was a private matter. Ah yes. There are 9 cursed people out there. We are hidden for most of the time, but the world government calls us demon carrier. They say the same about devil fruit eater, but we are the true demon carrier. He explained to her, and Asuka swallowed the lump in her throat. She always thought with her lineage she was the child of a demon, but being called a demon carrier. She and Naruto had more in common than she thought. Stop brooding around Freckles. As long as I stay in control of my anger, you'll never see the fox. But it could happen that I need to face my demons sometimes during our adventure. He chipped and she gave him an amused smile. They laughed together and sailed on. Cannon fire and roaring commands shook the Hai no Ishi. 3 ships under the sign of the Marines tried to fight the bigger pirate ship off. Too bad that the winds refused to serve them and they stood at the mercy of the Konoha crew. Asuka laughed at their face when Hai no Ishi cruised past them and stray cannonballs hit the enemy ships to give them a bit of damage. She set the sails of the Marines in flames and her captain cut them with wind blades. That would teach the Marines to block the entrance to the only supply way of Suna. Naruto sighed when they finally reached the canal that leads them directly to Sanagakure. For the crew it was nothing new because they sailed that particular canal already twice. Soon the gates to the port came in sight and the crew put the sails away. With the current they came into the merchant port of Sanagakure, where they were greeted by 3 familiar faces. The Konoha crew started to unload some supplies and the thankful people of Suna took them. Asuka stayed on the ship and watched Naruto brotherly hug a redhead who seemed like he didn't get enough sleep. Her gaze wandered to the ship next to them. It was a warship with a dragon as figurehead. She whistled. It seemed like the Revolutionary Army was here too. Asuka, come, we are needed in the city. Naruto called for her and she jumped on the pier to follow her captain. Gaara led them to the base of Revolution, silently talking with Naruto over plans they had already made. It saddened him that the people of Suna were starving because of the corrupt daimyo who tries to sell the land to the world government. They meet Monkey D. Dragon in the cage tower. Dragon watched the pirates enter the place and nodded in acceptance. They were fighters and he already read the wanted poster of all of them. Arashi no Namikaze, Susanoo no Sasuke, Cherrydock Sakura, Mando no Ino, Tanku no Choji, Kage no Shikamaru, Jukin no Neji and Hinata, Goken no Lee, Buki no Tenten, Yaju no Kiba and Kakaichu no Shino together held a bounty over Belly for the whole crew, excluding the newest member Fire Fist Asuka. It was an impressive total bounty, nearing the bounties of the weakest Yonko crew but nowhere the bounty on his own head. He followed the Konoha crew's record ever since they appeared in the middle of nowhere, causing havoc with the Marines. They had revolutionary traits within them and he needed someone who openly fought under the flag of the Revolutionary Army. Asuka? A new voice asked and the leaders looked to the newcomer. He wore a large black top hat with a pair of blue goggles wrapped around it, a blue jacket with the sleeves rolled up, a cravat and a pair of light blue cyan shorts held up by a belt with an elaborate flower design buckle. The freckled girl smiled brightly at the blonde revolutionary man and hugged him. Hey Sabo. Oh man, I am happy to see you. Luffy and I thought you were dead. She wailed. Sabo. Dragon barked. He had enough of that drama. Clear that outside. The tattooed monkey D-Dragon ordered and these two disappeared. Naruto chuckled and went back to work. The Konoha crew, minus Asuka who vanished, was on edge. Dragon held them back, said they should wait until the daimyo wants to visit them a last time to attack. The ignorant man announced his arrival in 5 days. For Naruto it was a long time until then and he was restless. Relax Naruto. Ino tried to calm their captain down but Shikamaru snorted. He is going to throw everything overboard. The navigator grumbled and the crew sighed. It would end that way, they already knew. I don't like the idea of letting a daimyo who allied himself with marines that near of civilians. Things are going to be messy. Sasuke said and the others agreed. Fighting in a village like Suna was always risky. Nanohana already experienced 3 Logia-type fighter and they risked the lives of many people there. We are moving, Naruto declared and the crew sighed. They had it coming. Together they went to their ship and grabbed their weapons, everything they could use. They met Asuka on the way. The girl was curious in what was going on. Sabo wasn't happy to hear that the Konohans left on their own accord but it made him even angrier that Asuka hooked herself up in the arm of the blonde leader and decided to go with them. She waved him and followed the crew into the desert. Sabo cooked inwardly and searched for Dragon. The problem was that the most wanted man was hard to find and so it took him nearly 4 hours to find said man. Dragon. The Konoha crew decided to leave. They're on the way too. I know, Sabo. Kage Gaara already informed me. That's why we are moving now. He warned me that their captain wasn't going to wait or following my command. I tried to get him more than once to join our thing but he seems to have his own dream and ambition. Dragon said and lead his revolutionary army and these who want to face the daimyo out of the village. The Konoha crew found themselves again in a big chaos. 3 vice admirals came to take over the rebellious Suna. Vice Admiral Stainless, Cancer and Doberman led 100 nameless marine thugs into the war against the desert village. The blonde pirate captain knew every of these 3 from his time as rookie officer in Marineford and they regenced him too. You are foolish enough to switch sides, Uzumaki. Cancer growled. It is Namikaze D Naruto now, Cancer. I have no respect for traitors who are sacrificing their own people. You are foolish to believe that you can fight a village full of rebellious people who give a shit about the navy. Naruto yelled and his crew readied their weapons. Pistols, katana, teeth, claws and devil fruit powers were showed openly. You think that 13 of you can fight against hundreds of marines? Are you nuts? Doberman questioned his sanity. Oh, you'll see how capable we are. Attack! Naruto cried and the pirates shouted their war cries. Chakra-fueled haki pressured the weaker minds into unconsciousness. An energy warrior appeared in the middle of the marines and knocked them up. Naruto himself flared his winds, fueling the flames of Asuka who decided to join him as a tag team partner into this fight. Asuka didn't enjoy killing the marines. She knew that nobody of the Konoha crew did, but she enjoyed the heat of a good fight. She followed Naruto through the battle to their first real fight, Cancer. The Vice Admiral gave them a good battle. Swords clashing but at the end the Admiral had to retreat when his sword broke under the force of Naruto's windblade. During that time she forced Stainless back and gave him a mark to remember. She noticed that the Revolutionary Army came fast in their vehicles to aid them in their fight. Asuka signed Sabo, who ran up to them as soon as the vehicles stopped, to fight with her. The first Konohans to retreat were Neji, Lee, Tenten, Sakura and Hinata. Some of them were wounded or out of breath and found safety behind the vehicles. Their captain knew that not all of them could fight as long as he and Sasuke did and sooner or later nearly the whole crew assembled and waited for the fight to end. Hours went on and the Revolutionary Army, Naruto, Sasuke and Asuka still battled against the Marines. Cancer and Stainless came back full power and Doberman still had a bit of endurance left. Sasuke was the next to retreat. Cancer, Stainless and Doberman teamed up in a last attempt to get control over the battle. The 3 crossed their swords and slashed downwards to their enemies. Cancer's sword clashed against Naruto's blade and broke. Doberman's blade met Asuka's flames and burned the hands of the Admiral. Only Sabo, who wanted to impress his sister with his strength, struggled. His weapon of choice, a metal pipe, wasn't the best in this combat. Stainless pushed him back and destroyed his pipe with another slash but the blonde revolutionary was rescued. Naruto gave him a concerned glance before he rammed Stainless his shoulder in the admiral's stomach. The marine stumbled back and dodged the pirate captain's wild swing. The marine fled, ignoring the whimpering daimyo who watched the whole battle to the end. Soon as people greeted the man with heated glares, the tired Konoha pirates sprawled themselves on deck of the ship and slept, till the sun woke them up on the next day. Yawning and stretching they walked to the cage tower. Naruto walked in but the rest of the crew seated themselves on the entrance and dozed off. The blonde captain high-fived Gaara who gave him a small smile. They were alive and well, the first merchant ships returned and soon Sanagakure would be a healthy village once again. "It is our time to go," Dragon announced and the others nodded. "I am going to leave too, Gaara. I promised a girl I would find a pirate for her." Naruto laughed and his friend wished him a safe journey. The crew and the revolutionaries returned to their ships and before Naruto could climb in the high no Ishi he was called by someone. Sabo ran up to him and breathed heavy. "I would like to thank you. You rescued my life and I was an ass to you. It's just, I wish that Asuka is safe. She is my older sister and was always stronger than me or Luffy. She always seems to carry our burden too. Asuka is strong on her own because she wants to protect her brothers, Sabo. Believe in her and she'll not fall. I think I know what you want to ask me next. I'll keep an eye on her. In return, take this with you," Naruto said with a bright smile and gave the blonde young man a Vivre card. "Maybe together, pirates and revolutionaries can bring the world peace and the same rights for everyone. We can stop the corruption," the reddish blonde said and walked up to his ship. With a breeze he stood on the figurehead of the high no Ishi and waved Sabo his goodbye. "We'll meet again, Sabo. You, Luffy, Asuka and me. Together we are going to raise hell in the new world," the blonde shouted and they took off. The flag of the Konoha pirates waved proudly in the desert wind that carried them back to the open sea. Naruto promised her. And now they were on the hunt after Blackbeard. Asuka could feel the thrill in her blood that they were finally on the hunt but they needed information since they lost the last tracks of Blackbeard when they aided Suna into their freedom. Naruto knew the man who had spies everywhere. His godfather Jiraiya, a man that was famous as the Master of Spies, lived in Konoha. He had spies everywhere, in nearly every city or village. Countless spies in the navy were under his direct order. "So, we are visiting Konoha?" Asuka asked. She wanted to see the island that was praised by the crew. It made her curious how the people were, if they were as friendly as the Konoha crew. Konoha it is. A good advice for you, don't bath in the public bathhouse on middays. Peeping Toms are the most active then. Naruto chuckled and Asuka, "Tisk-ed. They can try. I use the bathhouse whenever I wish," she declared and a flame flickered from her fingers. Naruto shook his head and laughed. "I warned you. Don't say it is my fault when you end up in a porn book." The captain chuckled and she face faulted. Asuka sighed and walked away, leaving Naruto for a short moment alone. Soon Sasuke approached him and leaned next to his best friend on the rail of their ship. "Don't let her out of your sight. I know that she is a strong-headed woman but some of the older generation is lusting after powers like her. And others are going to like her exotic beauty," Sasuke advised him and Naruto sighed. He knew that he was going to chew on stones as soon as he brought Asuka with him to Konoha because people like the warhawk Danzo Shimura looked for all kind of talents and they destroyed everything in their path. Not only could that be a problem but everyone who got a pair of working eyes saw Asuka's lineage. He had the same problem with his father. "What do you suggest? I cannot order her to stay on the ship. She is free to go where she wants to go." Naruto growled frustrated. He didn't want to lose her to some old farts or someone who was after her looks. He felt like she belonged to him, to this crew but he didn't want to force her in liking or even loving him. "Do it like I said. Stay near her. Watch her from the distance. Spend time with her and show her the island and maybe introduce her to the Hokage. Most of us aren't going to bother you as long as we stay in Konoha." The raven-haired man told him and the blonde sighed. With a thankful nod he dismissed Sasuke who smiled slightly. They docked on their personal pier and were greeted by noisy people who wanted to see their famous pirates. Young kids, too young to travel the sea, cried their hellos and wanted autographs from their heroes. Naruto chuckled and ruffled a young brunette boy's hair. "Come, Asuka, I show you around. Maybe we find Jiraiya today," Naruto suggested to her and she nodded. Slowly they made their way through the crowd and walked in the main street of Konoha. As soon as Naruto smelled the familiar smell of ramen, his stomach rumbled and he blushed. He rubbed his neck and Asuka laughed at him. "I could use something to eat too," she offered, and the blonde smiled brightly. "I'll show you the first place I visited when I was new here. Ichiraku serves the best ramen of the world," the blonde man declared proudly, and she laughed again because of his antics. The firewoman let herself dragged around by the wind man, and soon she sat on a bar chair and the both of them wolfed down bowl after bowl. Bottomless pits. Tucci, the old chef, snorted and prepared the next meal. The stand owner knew that some of the devil fruit eaters are bottomless pits for food. Most of them need the energy, but he could swear these two ate more than necessary. "You said something, old man?" Asuka asked between two bites, and he sighed. They were made for each other. Little did he know how much these two fitted the other. "No, my dear, eat as much as you wish as long as you can pay," he said, and Asuka paused. Did she have enough money? She watched wide-eyed how her captain put a good worth of money on the counter, and the man nodded. "That should be enough, Tucci. And a tip for dear Ayame." Naruto chuckled and got a dirty glare from the father of the waitress. Asuka's eyes became small with that sentence, and something deep within her growled. She scoffed and finished her meal. "Boss!" someone cried, and Naruto looked up from the rest of his own meal. "Konohamaru, how many times do I have to tell you that I am not your boss?" Naruto barked at the kid and gulped down the last bits of his soup. "That should be the 674th time that he told you that." Another teenager said to the now names Konohamaru, and their female companion snorted. "Shut up, Udon. Nobody wants a smartass." The brunette teenager defended himself, but Asuka snickered. Sighing, Konohamaru turned back to the blonde. "Common boss, we want to be part of the crew. Hunting for the big fishes and a treasure. We can fight." The young Sarutobi asked, and Naruto shook his head. "You are in no condition to fight on the high no Ishi, Kono. You could start as cabin boy, but we are not a crew of marines. No, stay here, where it is safe, and bother the old man about joining the crew. Let Iruka-sensei train the lot of you before I even think about taking you with me," the blonde man said, and shook his head. He was in the same age as Konohamaru when he started as a Marines captain, but he was naive back then. "Iruka-sensei!" Konohamaru cried when he saw the scared man walk by. The three of them vanished with the teacher, and Asuka let her held-up laugher burst out. "They are like Luffy, Sabo and me. A bit weirder but nearly the same." She chuckled, and he sighed. "And what role did I fulfill just now?" He teased her, and she shrugged. "You sounded a lot like your uncle right now. He refused to take Luffy with him, back when we were kids. I am happy he didn't do it, because now I have a brother who strives to become great." She smiled nostalgically. They left the ramen stand behind and walked through Konoha, talking to each other about things they had done in their younger days. Naruto had to shot some of the men in his age dirty glances when they leered after Asuka. Every one of them vanished as soon as the captain glanced at them. Behind his watchful back, Asuka did the same. She didn't know why she did it, but she growled at every girl that tried to approach Naruto. Her inner voice demanding that she should protect her what was hers. "Why do I think that he is mine?" she asked herself. Asuka wasn't sheltered, but until she met Naruto she was more of a tomboy, not bothering with female feelings and things females interested. She was a pirate by heart, a captain once. She held her head high in a domain of men. She knew some female sailors, but most of the sailors on the sea were males. Feelings like that. She knew brotherly love but not physical attraction. There are the hot springs. Naruto interrupted her musings, and she looked irritated to him. She smartly answered, and he chuckled. "My godfather is here, Freckles. Want to beat up a pervert?" the blonde asked her, and she smiled brightly. He knew what she liked. Together they sneaked up to the bathhouse, and he helped her up to the roof where someone sat and spied the bathing guest. She wanted to help him up, but he shook his head and signed her that he would watch. Asuka felt like a ninja today. Silently she sneaked her way to the white-haired man and let her flames lick her hand. She just needed to get his attention. A rather strange and wicked idea came to her, and she glanced down to Naruto, who watched her from the tree line. "Hey there," she huskily said, and got the attention of the peeping Tom. Her shirt was on fire and slowly burned away. She knew she would regret it afterwards, but she wanted to know how men reacted to her when she acted like that. The raven-haired girl made sure that her flames didn't consume her bindings, only the shirt. Normally her clothes weren't affected at all when she didn't want them to actually catch fire, but this time she willed her shirt to burn up. The pervert shot away, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Asuka laughed and jumped down to her captain. Naruto blushed up a storm, his winds furiously dancing around him. He needed to get back in control of his emotions, right now. He looked away from the raven-haired woman that gave him a bright 1,000-watt grin. Ashamed for his feelings, he gave her his shirt and looked away from her body. Asuka took it, and seconds later he dared to look at her again. That was ways better. He could walk around bare-chested, but he would never let one of his female comrades do that. "Was the show good for you?" she said in the same huskily tone, and the captain of the Konoha crew blushed even harder. His cheeks heated up and he was ready to pass out. "Where is she?" a new voice demanded to know, and rescued the stammering young captain. "Perv." Naruto breathed between his teeth, but it was enough to get the attention of the man who they wanted to meet. "Naruto, did you see that raven beauty that literally burned her clothes away? I need to know her." Jiraiya cried and shook his godson. "Don't you dare to leer after my nakama, Ero Sennin. She is off limits for your porn." Naruto growled, and the Sannin wailed about stupid godsons and unreachable beauties. Asuka snickered and watched the scene in amusement. "I am, Jiraiya, the epitome of manliness. I shall fall for no woman's wiles. When you're me, you only need to flash that to have women fall at your feet." Jiraiya declared at the sight of the freckled young woman proudly, and only got an embarrassed groan from his godson. "My name is Asuka." She introduced herself to the man who kneeled before her and asked for her to burn her shirt again. She smiled sadly at him and shook her head. "I don't think that my captain would approve if I burned one of his shirts. And I don't feel like it. I rather wish to know some information from the master of spies," she said, and Jiraiya jumped up. "What would I get?" the Sannin asked her, but a throaty growl from Naruto remembered the older man that he wasn't alone. "I am not going to feed you to the sharks, Ero Sennin. And maybe Asuka-chan isn't going to set you on fire." The blonde muttered, but it was enough to make the man shiver. He knew Devil Fruit Eater too well, and he could swear that Tsunade was one. "Okay, brat, girly, what do you want?" The Gamma, Sannin sighed, and Asuka groaned at her new nickname. She hated it to be remembered that she actually was a girl. "You got your damn spies everywhere, Kyofu. We have a name, but we need his location," Naruto told him, and Jiraiya impatiently signed to tell him more, but Asuka interrupted him. "Marshal D. Teach, known as Blackbeard. He killed one of my former nakama back in my time as daughter of Whitebeard. Kid, you shouldn't search after the devil himself. He is going to kill you just for the money your head is worth," Jiraiya said calmly, but his voice trembled, and he looked to Naruto, hoping his godson wasn't idiot enough to hunt after that man. "I promised I would bring her to Blackbeard, Jiraiya. I keep my promises, you know that," Naruto said with a deep sigh, and Jiraiya shook his head. "It was already too late. Give me 1 week. I'll have his location by then. A good advice from me, keep away Naruto. Her devil fruit might not be worthy enough for him to kill her directly, but yours. With your power he would be the conqueror of the sea in seconds." Jiraiya pleaded, and the blonde nodded. "It is Asuka's fight. She wouldn't like me interfering with it. Damn straight I wouldn't like it," she declared, and nodded her thanks to Jiraiya. Both young sailors left the spy master, and Naruto led her to his favorite place in Konoha. The sun downed over the small village, and they sat on top of the Hokage mountain. Asuka was thrilled by the sight. She could see why the land was called the Land of Fire, because the trees seemed to burn in the light of the dawning sun. She wished Luffy and Sabo could be here right now, but somehow she was happy with just Naruto at her side. Unknown to both of them, they leaned to the other, lightly touching shoulders and sharing warmth. Naruto smiled lightly and took in all the warmth he could get. Asuka leaned her head slightly in his direction. She saw the tender smile on the young captain's face, and she wished to keep it that way. It fueled her inner flames like his winds did whenever they fought together. The week together brought them somehow closer. Naruto introduced her to many people like Academy Sensei Amino Iruka, Sandame Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, Medic Senju Tsunade, and many other people the small village was famous for. He introduced her in the way of using chakra, and he said that she had a lot of potential since she got Haoshoku Haki to fuel it completely. Her level was nowhere near as the trained original Konoha pirates, but with time she could master it like all of them. Soon their time was up. Asuka became restless and her anger at Blackbeard grew with every news they got about him killing others. Jiraiya gave them against his own advice the location and she nearly commanded the crew to come back and set sails the very moment she got the location. Naruto had to stop her forcefully, giving his crew the chance to say their goodbyes to their friends and families. The Hai no Ishi carried them to their next location. Banero Island was waiting for them. It was a long travel and they meet Shanks once again halfway to the island. Asuka wasn't happy that Naruto decided against her and commanded his crew to stop his ship. Shanks greeted his nephew happily and ruffled through his blonde locks. Asuka huffed at the sight and walked to her quarters brooding about her plans. Shanks did notice her behavior and the tired looks on Naruto and the Konoha pirates and sighed. The redhead knew that some people would jump for their love interest in their own death and his own nephew worked himself and his nakama into the ground to please the fire girl. You seem to be a bit winded, Naruto. Shanks attempted to joke but only got a tired sigh. We have to reach Banero Island soon. We got our lead and I want to put an end to the hunt on Blackbeard. Naruto told his uncle who nodded seriously. I know you like her, Naruto, but if she really wants to face Blackbeard, let her go. She is going to drag you and your loyal crew with her down and it is going to be your end if you keep following her. Asuka isn't ready to face someone like Teach. He'll eat her alive. Shanks advised and saw the lights in his nephew's azure blue eyes dimming, like someone stole the fire in them. He had already seen that look, the look of a man losing everything he got. Gold D. Roger had the same look when he faced his end, and it made Shanks shiver in fear for his nephew. She is my nakama, part of my own family. Family sticks for each other, uncle. Naruto said and looked to his ship. The captains had a small dinner on the Red Force and it seemed like it ended with that. Naruto walked up to the rail and jumped on it. With a sad smile he turned a last time to his uncle and said, "We'll see each other again. If not alive, I'll personally greet you in hell." And the reddish blonde jumped over the gap between both ships. The Hai no Ishi sailed into her unknown future and it seems like she wouldn't return to the sea for a long time. They reached Banero Island right in time. Blackbeard's ship was docked in the port of the island and nobody seemed to be there. They brought Asuka to the island and the girl rushed away without saying her goodbye. It hurt Naruto that she didn't consider asking the crew to help her. He would gladly lend her a hand but that was Asuka's fight. She held the feud with Blackbeard up and Naruto knew that countless people, his own crew, his family on the sea and the folk of Konoha waited for his return. Set course to Konoha. We are going to refill our storage rooms and head for the new world. Naruto commanded gloomily and walked to his usual place and sat down on the figurehead. Sasuke and Shikamaru shook their heads at the sight of their captain. They knew that the blonde had a hard time to give the girl up. You heard him. Back to work. Sasuke barked at his lazy nakama. Muttering was heard and the crew did their job, setting full sail. The Hai no Ishi left the port behind and reached her pace fast. They didn't leave the island fast enough. Naruto looked back to Asuka's location and saw a flame tower erupt into the sky. He jumped from his position on deck and his chest hurt in pain. Something went terribly wrong on the island and he wanted to know what. Do we still have Asuka's sprinter? He asked to no one specifically. The crew was unsure to answer him and looked around. Naruto narrowed his eyes at them. Each of them didn't want to answer him because they knew that their captain was about to do something that could cost his life. Damn it, I am going to look for myself. He growled and walked to the cannon deck. The young Namikaze was right. There, under some tarpaulins, was the sprinter that Asuka had brought to them when she first joined the crew in Nanohana. He lifted the yellowish boat and brought it on deck, throwing it over the rail and jumping on it. Sasuke, the Hai no Ishi is under your command as long as I am away. I'll find a way to meet you up in Konoha. I promise that I'll return. The blonde shouted and set the small sail of the sprinter boat. He forced his devil fruit power to carry him as fast as possible, not giving his friends a chance to catch him. The blonde man knew that he was going to make the biggest mistake in his life. Dark smoke reached into the clear blue sky. That idiot. Sakura growled, watching the small boat disappear between the waves. She really hoped that he made it out alive. They needed them because no one of them, not Sasuke, not Shikamaru and no one of the rest of the crew could keep them working like Naruto. The blonde was everything that held the crew together. Why aren't we following him? He needs us right now. Kiba whined, his loyalty and instincts kicking in. Akamaru barked in agreement and Hinata and Shino seemed to agree with their best friend. Because we have no chance against Blackbeard. We are a crew since 2 short years. Blackbeard is a sailor for over a decade. I know we are fast, we have the power of devil fruits on the ship, but without a strong leader, no offense Sasuke, we are nothing. Shikamaru explained and everybody agreed against their will. He was right, Naruto lead them in every attack and it was his endurance, his experience and strength that kept them superior to other crews and marines. Then what will we do? I think that returning to Konoha isn't an option at this point. Lee asked and the others nodded. They waited from a command from Sasuke who sighed. We'll observe Blackbeard's ship from a safe distance. He ordered and the others nodded. Cries of turning the ship were heard and the sails needed to be changed. Hopefully they could get Naruto back soon. The blonde captain reached the island and jumped of the small boat. He ignored that it scratched over sand and he ran past the beach. Soon the young Namikaze reached the forest. People cried after him that he should stay away but their cries landed on deaf ears. He even ignored that his body already took his Logia form. He vanished with the wind and appeared near the battlefield of Asuka and Blackbeard. The sight of the bleeding girl kneeling in front of her opponent let him growl like a wild animal. He cheered inwardly when Asuka stood up again, ignoring Blackbeard's hateful words that nothing could stop darkness. Where darkness is, there is light too. I would regret to follow a man who is after power. And I would never do something I'll regret. Asuka declared, ignoring the taste of blood on her tongue. Your opinion is nothing worth on this world. It is sad that you decided to go against me, Asuka. Blackbeard sneered at her and called his power End in endless darkness. Dai Enkai. Entai. Great Flame Commandment. Flame Emperor. Asuka yelled and both attacks clashed. Naruto had to look away, deactivating every bit of his powers and forcing himself to stay where he stood because both attacks released powerful shockwaves. At the time when the dust cleared he could see how the battle ended. He didn't like the result. Asuka was down, bleeding and knocked out. Teach tried to reach her but he jumped in Blackbeard's way and growled. Don't touch her, you made a new enemy. Naruto shouted at the man. Blackbeard was tall, taller than him. Shaggy black hair was scorched by Asuka's previous attacks and the man himself seemed to be burned. The sky cracked over them. Naruto's anger and the unused power in the air let the clouds power up and thunder boomed above them. The wind howled in the ruins around the battlefield, pushing back the lingering darkness of Blackbeard's yami no mi. The man with the missing teeth grinned at him. And you are? Teach asked the blonde who bravely stood over his fallen friend. Your doom. Be gone with the thunderclap. Kirin. Naruto shouted and pointed his finger on the target. Blackbeard looked up to the sky and gulped. A roaring dragon of thunder rocket in his direction and crashed in him. Naruto stood there, heavily shaking. The Kirin demanded his toll on him. He wanted to pick up Asuka and leave but suddenly something pulled him away from her. He twisted in the air and saw that Blackbeard's power pulled him. Kei's Oagama. Wind Scythe. The blonde commanded and the winds formed 2 scythes, demanding blood from the enemy. Blackbeard was forced to push the blonde away and threw him into the same rubble as Asuka before. That another devil fruit user is able to wound me is surprising. Blackbeard praised the blonde who already stood up. Again he stood over the fallen form of Asuka, not daring to leave her side. She wasn't ready to face you. I let her go and it was foolish from me. But I'll defend my nakama, my family with my life. Naruto declared and this time wind and lightning formed themselves around his wrists. She still believes in Whitebeard, you fool. She'll never see you in the same position as him. Why wasting your time with a brat that doesn't want to be in your crew? You could join me and together we'll become the conquerors of the sea. Blackbeard suggested but Naruto frowned and shook his head. He raised his thumb to his headband and smirked. I am a captain of my own, Teach. I am not going to bow to any other pirate, marine or the world government. The day I'll bow in front of you is the day hell will freeze. My name is Namikaze D. Naruto. And I am a force of the sea herself. I am Arashi no Namikaze and you'll bow in front of me. Naruto declared. His Haoshoku haki fueled with his life force pressed against Teach's willpower. The captain of the Blackbeard pirates growled against the force of the young captain. The previous fight and the lightning dragon injured him and he needed to end the fight soon. Naruto cursed inwardly that he couldn't use seawater to end the fight right now. Blackbeard's darkness couldn't match up against the curse of the sea, and it would bring him the victory over this fight. He was an idiot to use so much of his energy to reach the island as fast as possible, and now he paid the price. Huh? Shikamaru sat on his place at the navigator's desk and looked up to a paper that the crew had ever since they started their journey. He was surprised that it was still there because every time they were in a fight the damn thing nearly burned his cards. Naruto gave it to him as a sign of trust, that it would always lead them back to their blonde idiot. It burned. The Vivre card burned and way too fast for his liking. Naruto was in great danger, it burned way too fast. But then it stopped. 1/3 of the card was left and Shikamaru hoped that, whatever happened to their captain, it would end soon in favor of Naruto. Shikamaru walked out of the navigation room, Vivre card still clutched in his hands, and looked to the island. Thunder boomed around them and the wind rushed inland. Waves became higher and higher and he knew that the blonde called the full power. He wasn't alone. Next to him stood the whole crew watching the winds ripping trees out and lightning clashing into the hills. They've never seen the full power until now. Did you see the firestorm clashing against that darkness? Whoever they are fighting is strong. Strong enough to destroy a ship with the flick of his wrist. Kiba whimpered and winced when a lightning bolt crashed directly on the island. The bolt itself took the shape of a dragon and they clearly knew that this was Naruto's doing. Again the wind picked up in speed. Even without sails their ship bowed dangerously at the power of these gusts. It was too dangerous to try to get back on the island for the crew. Everything they could do was watch. Something similar happened on the Hirishin. Ever since Naruto visited them on Drum and gave his mother a Vivre card she held on it. It was always in one of her pockets. The first time the card acted up was shortly after they parted. It scorched up a bit and it made her worried, but soon the card got back its original form and she was happy. Then, long enough, nothing happened. It seemed like her son behaved himself and Kushina was happy. They got news that Sanagakure, one of the 5 elemental islands on the edge to the New World, was liberated by the Revolutionary Army and the Konoha pirates. They defeated 3 vice admirals and a bunch of marines. It made her proud that her son's bounty was upped, but it also made her worried. Now the target on him was bigger than before. It wasn't enough that his status as an ex-marine made him already an enemy. Discussions over asking him to join the Shichibukai were printed in the newspaper and she snorted at the thought of her baby becoming a lapdog for the world government. But then something seemed to happen. She smelled ash and she put the Vivre card out of her pocket. It literally lit up and burned down and panic strokes her. Minato! She shouted shakily and her husband came to her. He had seen her freezing up and wanted to know what happened. The sight of his son's Vivre card let him gasp. That couldn't happen again. Kushina, give it to me. He asked her and took the glowing paper from her, fearing she could destroy it in her panic. He forced a bit of his own power into it. The lightning cracked a bit and one healthy edge of the paper turned northeast. They set their course to Banero Island. They're nuts, one of the town people shouted. They watched how their homes were turned into dust by the force of 3 fighters. The others agreed. Most of them had a hard time to hold themselves on the trees because the wind clutched on them and would scarified everyone it could get into its hungry maw. The fight was in a standstill at the moment, but both fighters' powers didn't retreat. Rubble crashed into the trees and they had to duck under some of it to avoid being killed by sharp objects. The remains of their village burned from the fire attack of the girl and with the young man's wind fueling them. Naruto stood in front of the burning village. The inferno heated him up, but since the flames weren't empowered by Asuka it drained him. He couldn't really use them, but he could try. Panting he raised to his full high and the blonde ignored the sweat dripping in his eyes. Blackbeard would go down. Too bad. The world government is going to be happy that I turned in the son of Yonko Namikaze Minato and the nephew of Shanks. And with your girlfriend on top of that they are going to reward me with the title of Shichibukai. Blackbeard sneered. Naruto's eyes turned blood red. His whiskers darkened and his hair became even more untamed. His anger woke his curse and his curse was after blood. He roared, Haki purring out and knocking everything in its way down. The shockwave of Haki could be felt even in the east, north, south and west blue. It took the shape of a 9-tailed fox and for the first time in this fight Blackbeard feared his opponent. But at the same time, you have no control over your power, boy. Teach shouted against the rushing winds and let his darkness fly into it. Soon they were circled in a dome of darkness and only the red ruby eyes could be seen in them. Blackbeard awed when lightning tried to crack his dome and fire caught in the wind. The ground shook under every step Naruto did and Blackbeard could feel the power of the blonde increasing drastically. He let his darkness consume everything and crash down on him and his enemy. It was over. Coughing up blood, Blackbeard sat up and saw the degree of destruction he had caused. The Namikaze was down, lying in his own pool of blood, next to Portgas d Osca. The brat had fought him on even grounds and during the imploding of the Dome of Darkness the reddish blonde had got him with a wind claw. Half of Blackbeard's face was bleeding with the injury captain of the Konoha crew had inflicted to him. His left eye was gone. Damn brat. Blackbeard growled and signed his crew to help him. This time, the victory was his. And he didn't want to risk the blonde brat and his girlfriend to team up against him. Impelled Down was a better place for them and they would make him a wealthy man. Vivre cards burned dangerously down on several places in the world that day. They announced the beginning of something big. Something that would shake the whole world.